Welcome back to Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm joined by Chris McElwain, aka Double Denim, and Sean Conley, all the way from Australia. We're here, of course, gentlemen, to talk about Ross County. We are at home. It's 3 o'clock. It's Saturday. What else could you ask for, Sean? I know it's not 3 o'clock over where you are, mate.
It's certainly not. No, it's quite late in the night here. I'll be up till about 1:30 in the morning watching this, but that's fine. That's what I'm here for. It's better than it's been. I don't like those nighttime games. They get me up very silly o'clock.
I love the dedication of all our overseas fans, Chris, but you do see a sense of that with the likes of Australia, Japan, New Zealand, all represented on Acsom.
Absolutely, a bit like the club itself. It's got that international reach. You get CSCs as to the other side of the world. So it's incredible the impact that Celtic has on people and the interest that it generates. And it's just for us, it's like it's a hometown club, but I just think it's a club that never leaves you. It's a club that no matter where you go in life, you've always got that connection to the club and the fans and the support. So yeah, it's awesome. And as you say, we've got an international panel here now with Ryan on the other day as well, which is, we've got the States, we've got Australia, we've got New Zealand, we've got Budapest. I was nearly going to say Bucharest there, which I upset Kev when I said that. Budapest as well,
and we've got Swindon.
We've got Swindon, and we've got Yogi over in Ireland as well. So
absolutely, mate. Yeah, we're international, continental, and here is the Celtic team group. The starting 11 for today. Let's remove that little banner and have a wee chat about this, shall we? Schmeichel starts in goals, and the back four is Alistair Johnston, recently nominated for one of the Best Defenders award by FIFA. Left back, we have Alex Baye, something to discuss there. And the two central defenders are Cameron Carter-Vickers and Liam Scales comes back into the team. The midfield three is Callum McGregor. It's Luke McKeown and Paulo Bernardo. And then up top, we have Forrest, Maeda and Ida. We'll start talking about the starting 11. I'm going to come to you first, Sean. A big topic of conversation, coming into this game was Brendan Rodgers being asked around about the form of Engels, and I thought his response to that was absolutely class. Did you get a chance to see it?
I didn't actually know. What did he say?
Well, the way that the question was kind of angled, the way it was shaped was almost as if, this guy's cost 11 million quid, and he's more or less struggling to settle and all this kind of stuff. Now, I had said the other day there, because it seems to be the transfer fee that people keep focusing on, and I get it. It's a record signing. It's a huge amount of money for a club like Celtic. But my point is this, right? If you want to talk about the transfer fee, what he has done since he signed for Celtic is he has become a full Belgian international. He has played in Champions League. Not only played, he has had 3 assists in 5 games. So in terms of value, he's probably more valuable than he was when we signed him, right? Because we signed him from Augsburg, etc., etc. So this was brought up in the press conference, and Rodgers was unequivocal in his support for Engels. And he used examples like Bernardo last season, like Kuhn, and he spoke about the fact that you've just got to give these guys time to mature and develop and adapt to the Scottish game. So I don't mind that he's sitting on the bench after that, but it was great to see Rodgers actually just stepping up and saying, you know what, let's not overreact here.
Yeah, those are some great examples. Very recently, particularly Bernardo. And yes, he's kind of talking against himself in a sense that Engels has mostly been starting ahead of Bernardo, who has developed. Well, and sorry, I'm doing that sarcastically, but I shouldn't be. Who has definitely developed, but like if you're making the point that he's developed into a player, well, Engels has been preferred to him recently. And look, but it's as valid though that this kid is 21. There's nobody coming through our system at that age that's going to be starting a game in the Champions League. So I think that speaks to the quality on its own. 4 caps for Belgium, who are no mugs by any means. So he's definitely got a bright future ahead of him. Hopefully it's for a couple of years here. And as you mentioned, even if it's not for a couple of years here, he'll leave for a decent fee, whether it's... Look, even if he doesn't do well and we eat maybe 3 million, how is that any different from eating 3 million on signing some jobber that's not in the squad and leaves for nothing, We could be raking, if rumours are to be believed, we could be raking in some money for Alessandro Bernabei getting moved on. Quite interesting how the transfer market works these days, getting all our money back for what was it? Oh, I can't remember his surname. And also, when we sold the boy to New York, we got all the money back as well. The Polish striker,
Patrick Klimala.
Klimala, yeah. I think sometimes the transfer market is just weird. I think when you're not desperate, like some teams, then you can pretty much recoup your transfer fee if you're willing to hold on.
Well, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If we get 8 million quid for Bernabe, that's Rafael Scheit's money as well from the Brazilians. So brilliant bit of business. Donny Tiny Hands is coming in to say, need to lay off Engels. Totally agree with that. It will take time for him to develop. Now, we'll start off with the midfield, Chris, because obviously that's where the Engels discussion took place in yesterday's press conference. McGregor is your constant, if you like, and McKeown makes another start alongside Paulo Bernardo. Bernardo, I think this season has been excellent, even though he has been backup, if you like. 3.5 million quid for a player like Paulo Bernardo, captain of the Portuguese under-21 side. And I think last season he was up and down with his form. There was the purple patch we kept talking about, and then he came back into it near the end of the campaign. But I think we've seen enough. Certainly on Acsom, we were all saying, sign this guy, because I think we were expecting to sign him and Ida for roughly the same money in terms of, what was it, 6 and 6? They were talking £6 million each. We got him on the cheap. We paid a wee bit more for Ida, but I think Bernardo earned his spot today.
I would totally agree. I think his form this season, even in the I guess the more sporadic appearances, would justify that. But I think just to go back very quickly to the Engels point, we're talking about requiring time. Well, Bernardo needed time. He had half a season with us last season. He's came in, and I think he looks a better player this season, despite, as you say, the lack of first team start appearances. But I mean, I think you look at players like Kuhn, Bernardo, and you use them as examples for a player like Engels, and you say, look, it does take time. I always think a minimum 6 months for a player who's coming from a foreign country, and particularly, as Sean rightly said, you talk about a 21-year-old kid. At 21, I didn't want to leave my mummy's house, never mind go to a different country and play for, the biggest, well, for me, the biggest club in Britain. So, I mean, I just think, let's lay off the kid. I think Brendan's shown some real good management. He's backed him publicly, which I think a manager should always do. I think all the best managers tend to do that. You never really heard Alex Ferguson coming out and slating too many of his players, even when they were off form. So I think Brendan's managed this really well. He's taken him maybe out the firing line today. It's a good match to give him a rest, along with a number of other players. And I think, the great thing about our squad depth at the moment is you can bring in players like Bernardo, and you've mentioned McKeown as well. We've been clamouring at the bit to get McKeown into the team, see what he can do. He hasn't let us down in any of these appearances, whether they be just cameo appearances or when he's played for, a bit more substantive time. So I'm really keen to see him take his opportunity today and cement his position as being part of that midfield grouping that we've got the ability to rotate in and out. So I think the changes today all across are interesting. I think the ones in midfield are. It's a great example of how we've improved over the last couple of seasons. We are, you take a player like Hatate out, you bring Bernardo in. You take a player like Engels out, you bring McKeown in. McGregor, retains his place as a captain. I think he's. He just carries so much responsibility. But again, you've got Engels and Hatate who can potentially come off the bench later in the game if we need them to. So there's no downside to this for me.
It's an impressive bench. Like you say, there are plenty of good comments coming in. Let us know your predictions for today's match against Ross County. I found it interesting yesterday, Sean, that Brendan Rodgers was talking about Don Cowie, the manager, of course, of Ross County. He was Brendan's first ever signing when Brendan was the gaffer at Watford, and he signed him from Inverness Calais Thistle. So there's a wee bit of linkage in there as well. I always find it refreshing how respectful Brendan is to his opposing number. I had the pleasure of getting a wee bit of insight into that. They were playing Hamilton Accies, and it was the game that Edouard made his debut. You remember at New Douglas Park all those years ago?
I do.
And I found myself, he did. And I remember after it, me and Kev Graham were talking about the performance of Edouard, and Kev wasn't convinced. And I just thought, nah, this guy's the real deal,
Because he was 19, I think, as well.
Yeah, he was 19. And I think that the big issue was, that thing that people then held against him later on, where he was just so laid back. He had that Samaras laid back kind of gait about him. He did look a bit kind of lazy, and he didn't really bother. He wasn't going to do any unnecessary running that night. But I found myself in the dugout, not in the dugout, sorry, next to the dugout and in the tunnel as well. And you should just see the way that Brendan Rodgers conducts himself. You know, he's opposite numbers at Hamilton as it was that night. I think he's class. I know a lot of people think that there's the big massive ego and all that, Sean, but I just think he's a class act. And every time he is put in front of those cameras, like last week, we had a wee chat, didn't we, privately about that question he was asked. I mean, he was asked a question by a young pundit, a young journalist, and I think there was a lot of good points in the question, but the boy kind of went on a wee bit and he mentioned sofa score, so a lot of people were like, "Oh, come on, get rid of him, that's all data wank and all that kind of stuff." And Brendan Rodgers was class, Sean. He was absolutely class. He just said, "Relax, take your time," and because there was a good point in the question, and I think what I'm trying to say here is, it's almost in Brendan we trust. You just know you've got a class act with this gaffer.
And yeah, look, and anyone that's ever tried to use data to support a point that they would like to make will know how much effort that takes. It's not as easy as just picking a number off the internet, as a lot of people think. You have to know what you're looking for and how to interpret it. Otherwise, it is just numbers. And I'm sure Alan Morrison can speak to that. He does a lot of that stuff. But yeah, Rodgers was good. It was actually, when it was cut up onto social media, it looked quite unkind because the way it was cut up was, it was this kid doing this big long, he was tripping up over himself and getting nervous, and then the way it was cut on Twitter or whatever was just Rodgers going yes in response to this really long question, and it looked like it was a really kind of sarcastic, scathing response. But as you said, he did kind of like look after the kid thereafter. So he does. He and I think Neil Lennon was quite good at that as well. Like recognizing that the journalists are doing a job and like having kind of empathy towards them and not being hostile. And Postecoglou kind of was like that, but then he also didn't suffer fools at the same time. So I feel like if Postecoglou would have given that guy a lot of time, but then what Postecoglou does bite back on is like the banal questions by the experienced journalists that have loaded meanings. He doesn't take that well, So I think we've been quite good with having managers that deal with the media in the last few years. You'd have to kind of go back to Strachan, who just didn't have much time for them, I guess.
But he did it in a funny way as well, though, Sean, didn't he?
That's true. Yeah, he did. He did it in a deprecating, humorous way. Yeah, so it's good, And I heard Adam Ida's, I read Adam Ida's media duties as well. He was talking about his form. That was quite interesting, saying that he came back this year thinking he was just going to pick up where he left off, and it's not worked out like that, and he was unhappy with his form. But he sounded like he feels like he's turned a corner now. So and that's him starting today. So I do wonder. I actually put $5 on him to score a hat trick, and Jamesy Forrest as well, mainly because I noticed that the only wingers we've had score a goal so far this season are Kuhn and Maeda. So that's Forrest, Palma, and Yang all goalless. So I've got a feeling that Forrest, having just signed a new contract, is going to hit one today.
And that will be 16th season on the bounce. Not a club record, incidentally. I think the record's 19. The icicle was it Alec McNair. I think he scored in 19 seasons consecutively. But Jamesy has done 15. So if he does that today, that'll be another milestone for him, Sean. But yeah, I think you're kind of blessed with these managers, but there is definitely a certain way to conduct yourself when you're the manager or the captain or even a player, the Celtic Football Club, and Rodgers certainly does it. Tony Davern, always an absolute pleasure to see you in the chat. Tony was at one of our gigs last year. It was, Chris. He came to Don Max to see some of the ex-Celts. It was great to meet you, Tony. No Palma again is worrying. What's up there? I read a story last week, I think it was after the international break, actually, where he had a family bereavement, Chris, and he was dealing with that. There was a few other things back home that he was dealing with. But he is out the picture. And again, I can link this into what I was saying about Brendan. I think Brendan Rodgers has got a very succinct view of how you conduct yourself as a player within any of his teams, wherever he's been. And I've said this before and I'll continue to say it. I won't change my mind on it. Palm was an excellent footballer, technically very, very gifted. I don't think he's going to make it under Brendan Rodgers. I really don't. And maybe it's an attitude thing, all that stuff. Sometimes I get annoyed with the social media output of our players. I don't even think it's that. I just think it's, taking an instruction onto the park and fulfilling it. I think that's the issue for Palmer.
I don't know what the coaching. Sorry, Chris. I was just going to make a quick point. I don't know what the coaching setup's like now, but Palmer stopped playing when Harry Kewell left the coaching setup.
Interesting point, mate. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, coincidence or
maybe it was just very good for him, But that's a brilliant point actually, because remember that wee golden vein of form he had. This time last year, we would have been talking about Palmer in a completely different way, wouldn't we? He had done it in the Champions League and all that. Great point.
Yeah, and you consider the type of player Kewell was. I mean, if anyone could get the best out of a winger, you think he'd be the one to do it. So, yeah, look, it's a shame to see any player not make the most of their opportunity at this club, because it is such an opportunity to come and make yourself a hero at Celtic. And we've been a club that's been very fortunate to have some absolutely phenomenal wingers over the years. So you'd be in fabulous company if you could make it. But not ever, even the best players. You look at some of the world superstars. Kevin De Bruyne didn't make it at Chelsea, just couldn't. Didn't work with the manager, for example. Mo Salah, another one, very, very similar. And we've had a share of players who have, either gone on to make better careers post Celtic, or have had, brilliant time at Celtic, can go on and do it at other clubs. So just sometimes club, manager, system, and player, they're just, they're not always, 100% compatible. I don't wish Palma any ill will. I would love to see him take, if he gets another opportunity, to take it and really show us what he can do. But I think, given that we're approaching the January recruitment window, if he doesn't get any game time between now and the point where that window really starts to do business, I can't see him retaining his position as a Celtic player. And I think actually it might be better for both player and club to part ways. And as I said, I don't do that with any ill will towards the player. I just think it's a short career, and you want players to be making the best of it. And I think players sitting on the bench or not even making the squad, it's not good for anybody. The club's wasting an investment, and the players losing precious time in their career. So for me, if you can't make a meaningful contribution to the team, if for whatever reason you can't make it into to fit in the system, or you can't make it to establish yourself as part of the first team squad, then move on.
I think the big thing is it just gives you that stronger core group. And the two examples I use are always, at the moment, until they prove me otherwise, it's always Yang and Palma on the wings. I would much rather somebody else came in January who actually contributed, because I don't feel that they two are. And when we go back to the centre half, we've got two bodies in there, in Nawrocki and Welsh, part of the squad, part of the Champions League squad, not contributing. So I'd much rather the two of them moved on and we bring somebody in who is pushing for the jersey. Let's talk about the defence then, Sean. AJ, as we say, obviously he has been nominated for a very prestigious award. You've got the Central Defensive Partnership that we saw for a big part of last season in Carter Vickers and Scales. It's important to ensure that a player like Scales comes in and gets game time, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I was kind of thinking it might be Carter Vickers, not necessarily for form, not because he scored that on goal, but just because of his injury history. I thought it might have been him getting rested, but he's gone with keeping the balance of left and right, and bringing Scales in for Trusty, which is interesting. Splitting up the law firm. I always think Carter Vickers and Trusty sounds like a law firm at the back there. So I think Scales, he'll come in, he'll do a job. I don't think he'll miss too much of a beat.
But it would be Carter, Vickers and Trusty, as in three people. If that was a law firm, it would be three of them, wouldn't it?
That's what it sounds like. Carter, Vickers and Trusty.
But Carter Vickers is like having two defenders anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a back three, just the two of them. And Bailly's coming in, obviously, probably on merit. He was going to make... There was so much fatigue on Wednesday night. He was going to make as many changes as possible. I think when you think back to the game, Johnston was not really hitting the byline. He was not getting up. So I'd say not really surprising that he's probably still got a bit in the legs. And I think Scales is just the obvious one to come in. I guess the only surprise is that it was Trusty that drops. And it's not that big a surprise, really, because you're just choosing balance over who should be the one that's rested. So I don't think it's too wild.
Yeah, I seen there just the other day on the socials that obviously he's announced that he's His partner is due a kid in March, I believe, Chris.
Yeah.
If Carter Vickers was the one to drop out, psychologically, people might have thought it was a drop-in rather than just the rotational thing because of the mistake the other night. But Carter Vickers, if anyone is allowed, who's built up a bit of credit in the bank, it's Carter Vickers. I mean, sometimes he's won games on his own with his performances. So I don't think that'll be laboured. I don't think it will affect him. And there's one other thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to Bailly is I was looking at the performance of Taylor the other night, trying to figure out why it was better when Alex Valle came on, right? And we know that obviously there's been all this chat around whether or not we're going to keep him till the end of the season. That type of loan deal has fared us well when you look at Ida, Bernardo, Carter Vickers, Jota, and you're hoping that Bailly could maybe be the next one in line. It does feel a bit temporary though, Chris, that if we do have him, it'll just be until the end of the season. Do you get that impression as well?
Yeah, I think so. There was, we saw the report come out a couple of days ago saying that, Barcelona aren't looking to bring him back in January. So that's positive. That means at least I think we've got him for the next, 6 months of the season. And I think he's in and around the squad on merit because when he has come in, either by virtue of Taylor's injury early in the season or, just in terms of bringing himself into the team, I think he's really done well. I don't know if he's quite got to the point where he's excelled yet, but he certainly looked comfortable coming in, and we've not looked weaker down that side as a result. If anything, I think he looks to be a more solid defensive player. Yet he spends a lot of time getting up, getting forward, and attacking as well. So I think Bailly is if we could keep him, I think it would be a great signing. I don't get the impression that Barcelona are keen on selling him. There's 6 months to go. Both player and either club may change their mind on that, or may Celtic may make Barcelona an offer they can't refuse. We know their financial position is not fantastic at the moment, so maybe we quite frankly take advantage of that. But I would be keen to see Valle establish himself possibly ahead of Taylor. If Taylor and club are at an impasse in terms of contract, then there's a chance we're going to lose Taylor at the end of the season through his own unwillingness to sign a contract. Then for me, you invest in players that want to be here. Now that means we might have to go to the well and bring in not just one but two left backs potentially, if we can't keep Valle and Taylor does decide to go. So that is very much the biggest concern position for me. But we're showing that we can make good recruitment decisions. Despite some recent history, so I'm hoping that whatever the outcome, whether it's keeping both players or neither player, that going into next season we'll have decent options at that position.
Yep. We could go into the summer with no real recognised left back, Sean.
Potentially.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I seen a story that Barcelona's left back was carried off injured today. So I don't know if that changes the way things are.
It might.
For recalls. Was it at sort of? I don't know. I don't watch too much outside Scottish football to know the ins and outs, but something Balde was taken off in a stretcher. So.
Not Amido. I don't know where he's
not Amido Balde, no.
Nah. Aero 250, you're in and saying Engels will come good. I agree with that. As Brendan said, many wrote off Bernardo and Kuhn, and they came onto game. Listen, people were writing off Bailly after his debut against Falkirk. San Fran Celtic, if Ralston can't start this kind of game, then we need a better backup. What's your take on the right back position? I'm quite happy with it at the moment, Sean, to be honest. And I think it's tough at times to get everybody the game time. But Ralston, he's just dependable for me. A lot of people might say that's no good enough.
He's not as good as Alistair Johnson. And if you think back, we were having a conversation 2.5 years ago about whether we should be starting Ralston or Juranovic. It was a genuine debate. We couldn't quite decide on that. But then that said, go back 4 years and we were saying, we're giving Ralston a new contract. Is this what we've come to? So like he's never been one that's fully convinced everyone, but then he's also turned a corner at one point and been one where nobody's really been wanting him out the door per se. So I think he's an established squad member. I think to have him as a backup is like when you've got a player that's got and I'm not saying he's sensational, but he gets a start for Scotland. And to have that kind of level of quality as your backup it's a pretty solid position to be in, particularly because if you've got that kind of level as backup, usually they're angling to get out after a year or two of not being a regular. So if you got someone that's happy to stay there like that, then that's a pretty good position to be in. Ralston is a good player.
Yeah, he's going to have one of those very interesting records that I think Near Beaton had, whereby he wins a trophy every half a dozen games or something for Celtic, because he's only played like 108 games. But I do remember when he was given that one-year deal that you spoke about, Ange Postecoglou had just come in the door, and 2 players were given a one-year deal. So here you go, guys. And again, this goes back to application, attitude. Yeah. Lee Griffiths and Tony Ralston, right? So who's the better player? Who had the most natural talent? I think everybody would agree it was Lee Griffiths, right? He's now playing for Mandurah City, somewhere in Australia. I don't know where that is in terms of your locale, Sean.
Yeah, I've played on that pitch.
There you go. Yeah. It's like a public pitch, isn't it? I mean, he's kicking a ball for a kind of amateur team over in Australia, and Tony Ralston is playing for Scotland, and he's sitting on the bench for Celtic in Champions League games. And I think that personifies what application and attitude's all about, Chris, when you look at Tony Ralston versus Lee Griffiths. Different position, but I'm talking about talent.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think to be a success at Celtic, you need both, right? One won't really work without the other. You need to have the attitude and the work ethic, and I think conduct yourself appropriate to the expectations of the club and the fans to be a success at this club. But you need talent as well. Like you can't just get by in terms of hard work. And I think we have to remember that about Ralston. Everybody thinks Ralston's a grafter. He is. But there's talent there as well. He proved it under Ange. I mean, he was scoring last minute winners for us. You know, he was really contributing to a successful season. For me, he's a backup, but he's a good backup. So I'm perfectly comfortable. We've got Alistair Johnson, who's an absolute diamond in the team, I think. And this is just my personal opinion. I know people have various opinions on this. I think Alistair Johnson's a better player than Juranovic was. I felt Juranovic was a great player. I think Alistair Johnson is a better player both defensively and just as good going forward. So if I had to choose between the two, personally, I like everything about Alistair Johnson. Plus, I think he seems to get what it means to be a player at Celtic, which is so important and really resonates with the fan base. Ralston, for me, he's a guy that I think you can trust him if he's called upon. He comes in, doesn't do the spectacular, but he does his job, and I think he does it to a pretty high level. And if we are the reason that he is in and amongst the Scotland squad, then I think that's great, even despite the role he's playing at our club. So, no, got full trust in Ralston. And actually, looking at the whole back line today, for me, there's nothing controversial about it. You've got Liam Scales, comes in for Trusty, fine, complete trust in Scales at this point. It could have been Carter Vickers going out if Scales had come in. No problem. There's nothing controversial in that lineup for me, because we've got proven options in that area of the pitch.
Yeah, without a doubt. But I mean, Ralston, again, the big debate around Juranovic or Johnson. I'm in the Johnson camp for the last probably half a year. I think Johnson's proven himself to be a far better defender. And it was interesting how he was talking about how different the role is under Brendan compared to Ange Postecoglou. We need to hold on to Baye even, says Aero 250, and Swindon, the centre of the earth, says Celt 88. I won't read out the next comment that you made, Celt 88. Celtic 4-0 today, I reckon. What's your take on it, Sean? Do you think it'll be as comfortable as 4-0?
Look, Ross County don't travel so well. Looking at their road record this year, they do have a good player in Ronan Hale up front. I think he'll probably play just off Jordan White. So they're going little and large. They're having a throwback of the two up front with the little and large, which is interesting. They do have a really good defensive record at home, and they've got some good, but on the roads they tend to crumble a little bit. So if we're on it, I think we'll take a few off them. If we're suffering from a hangover mentally, I know there's been changes of players, so it shouldn't be a physical fatigue really. But if we're suffering from a mental hangover from Wednesday, it could be a stodgy one. It's December soon. These games do tend to get a bit cold and stuck, but I think we'll take at least a 3-goal margin based on Ross County's away record.
3-0 sounds good for me. All over the world, people are tuning in to watch Celtic this afternoon. Brendan Monaghan in the Netherlands. We have Bones even. Hello from Canada. Should be 14 points clear in 2.5 hours. Listen, it's one of the ones. I just think that if we click, we can do teams some damage, Chris. But today, with the changes and everything else, I think a 3-0 scoreline for me would be something I would be more than happy with. What's your prediction?
Well, I'm usually pretty optimistic with the predictions, but I saw John go line saying 10-0, and I think that's too optimistic even for me. But I think I'll go one slightly better. I'll go for 4-0.
4-0. There we are. We'll be back at half time. Everybody get involved in 45 minutes. All that's left for me to say is go and enjoy the game. And thank you to Chris McElwain and to Sean Conley for joining me on A Celtic State of